Greetings, my good bitches. The name's Francis, Coke Francis. I'm an editor, Twitch streamer, drag artist, and I'm here because I'm too old to be drafted into World War III. Also, apologies in advance for my voice sounding like this. I am very hungover after going to a Pride event last night where 4 people recognized me and I immediately let it go to my head. I may only be 30, but I am old enough to remember things that some of my younger comrades might not. For example, I remember when edibles still tasted like shit, and the only thing motivating you to finish one was that it would get you high in 2 hours. I remember when women thinner than me were called whales in every tabloid possible. I even remember when you could park your car at an airport drop-off for more than 30 seconds without TSA calling the bomb squad. And yes, that last thing actually did happen to my mom and me in the year 2004. But I'm also old enough to remember when an entire world of other queer people was not readily available at my fingertips at all times. And if I wanted to see gay people be gay on a screen, I had to take advantage of my squarely middle-class socioeconomic status and watch whatever was on Logo TV, available on the cable package that my family just happened to have. For about 7 years or so, and before streaming and YouTube took over, there was a cable TV channel that was entirely dedicated to queer and trans interests, which was admittedly a pretty ballsy thing to do, especially during the second Bush presidency. And sure, I could have switched on Bravo at any time to see gay men as acting sidekicks to straight female reality TV stars. But let's be real, that format got dreadfully boring after the reality TV boom during the writer's strike of 2007. I was much more interested in the weird, corny, experimental programming that was going on Logo, where I found queer and trans people that I actually liked and could kind of relate to, as well as plenty of people that I didn't like or relate to. It was this microcosm of gay life that I could observe and learn about at a time when I wasn't old enough to party with all of my favoritist homies on Logo TV. But then everything changed in 2012 when the hetero nation attacked. Or rather, the network announced that it would be shifting away from its usual LGBTQ-oriented programming. They even de-zestified their logo. And just like that, this lovely little niche channel that I had found a safe space in was gone, while the bitchy Bravo gays remained. So as someone whose job is on a platform that's partially responsible for destroying cable, I decided to dig deep and find the answer to this question. Whatever happened to Logo TV? But before we get into it, if you are a fan of watching a very tired drag queen talk about nerd shit forever, I ask that you please pitch a TV channel of your choice to a bunch of boring executives, and when they ask exactly what kind of content you plan on airing, give them a pitch to remember by going ahead and unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. Also, since I've been asked about this before, all of my sources are listed below in the description box. So, queer representation in the decade I was born, specifically on TV in the US, ranged anywhere from singular characters on sitcoms to completely non-existent, or at least somewhat offensive. Bisexual representation existed from Sharon Stone's legs to Sharon Stone's legs. And trans representation? Forget about it. Unless you were the butt of one of the worst aged jokes from the Ace Ventura movies, the scraps we were dealt were confined to lesbian kiss episodes on sitcoms, in which a straight female character would kiss a lesbian or bisexual character on the lips exactly one singular time. And it was really entirely just for the purposes of spectacle and or comedy. Because it's a straight person being gay with a gay person, and gay is funny. And only E for Eve kisses, by the way, because as you know, it always still has to be something that men can jerk off to. Forget about Adam for Adam kisses, because that's gross. But straight women kissing women is hot, and that's 90s logic for you, kiddos. Granted, this was during an era where producers were trying to actively push boundaries and were earnestly trying to include more gay characters, but networks still viewed any depictions of same-sex relationships as controversial. And if there was any queerness happening on screen, there could be no allusions to anything remotely sexual, because queerness was inherently viewed as something sexual. This is what I mean when I say that we never actually fully recovered from Hays Code restrictions. I made an entire video about that if you are interested. As Ron Becker noted in his book Gay TV and Straight America, so viewers got to see Carol and Susan wed on Friends, but they didn't get to see them kiss. And fans of NYPD Blue could hear male hustlers talk about their johns, but the only sex they got to see involved the precinct's straight cops, naked butts and all. Clearly, chastity was the price gay characters paid for admission to primetime television in the 1990s. In 1997, an episode of Ellen aired called The Puppy Episode, where everyone's straight mom's favorite lesbian announced she was gay.
Susan, I'm gay.
And people lost their goddamn minds. But this ended up winning her 2 Emmy Awards, a Peabody Award, and a GLAAD Media Award. So the networks decided, maybe gay people are real after all. And Ellen's coming out ultimately paved the way for a lot more queer characters in TV. Granted, a lot of these roles were still sidekick characters that just perpetuated more stereotypes, which is why, despite some problematic elements that are concurrent with 90s culture, Will and Grace is credited as being the first show to at least somewhat educate the American public that gay people are, in fact, just people. The 2000s saw more queer representation with reality shows like The Real World, and, in my personal favorites, the bizarre dating shows in the Wild West days of Bush-era MTV. Guys, if you've never watched the gay episodes of Date My Mom, you are missing out.
Silly straight woman.
But in 2003, the Bravo network struck gold when they found a way to capitalize off of gay culture while also creating a product with mainstream appeal. Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. If I gave all my opinions on the original Queer Eye from the 2000s, we would be here all day, and we have a lot more to cover in this video. TLDR, it was a group of BuzzFeed gays who sold out for millions to turn our unique culture into something palatable enough for straight people to consume, all while perpetuating stereotypes and unrealistic standards for queer people in that they should be pristine, erudite beings at all times to set an example for slovenly straight men, which in turn led some straight women to view gay people as accessories. Because behind every great straight woman, there's always a fabulous gay best friend, right? Meanwhile, the MTV networks were looking to fill new cable slots, and pitched the idea for Logo in 2004. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this was a very ballsy move. Executives remained firm in wanting to preserve safe TV, and George W. Bush had just been re-elected in the US, partially due to fervent support of his constitutional ban on same-sex marriages. But as it is, and always has been, the more they try to suppress us, the louder we are. So the demand for representation was very much present. Founded by former MTV exec Matt Farber, and led by former MTV Network's president Brian Graydon, Logo TV was officially launched in 2005 as the very first advertiser-friendly TV channel directly targeted towards the queer community. After reaching a deal with Comcast, the channel was owned by a notoriously cool and chill company known as Viacom, which is now known as Paramount Global. But for Logo to claim its spot on most cable packages, that meant VH1 mega hits got booted Showgirls style. And good riddance. Just kidding, I don't actually have anything against VH1. And it joined the leagues of MTV's other special interest channels like Comedy Central, the original VH1, and, of course, Spike TV, which I also did a video on if you're interested. Some people thought the channel was called Logo because the L and the G stood for lesbian and gay, because the rest of us, right? Thankfully, the channel's website said otherwise. We chose the name Logo TV because a logo is an identity, and nothing's more important than having your own unique identity and making it work for you. Your logo is your symbol. It's what you put forward with pride, it's who you are, and it's what we are. work. Also, when I went to look this up on the original source, it was only available as an archive on Wayback Machine. I told you I'm too old to be drafted into World War III. Now, getting such a bold and progressive channel pitched and created in the mid-2000s was nothing short of a miracle. And I deeply empathize with wanting to create authentic, uncensored queer content without having to bend the knee to advertisers. And I'm currently doing this 20 years after Logo was first created. So Logo's hardships did not end there, and some people thought that the channel was doomed from the start. As a former Logo exec told The Wrap in an article published around the time of the channel's downfall, the executives picked to launch the channel shared one thing in common. They were all gay or lesbian, but strategically they weren't aligned on some of the most crucial decisions that would ultimately make or break the channel. But what went on behind the scenes and in the offices of Logo was way more interesting than anything they ever put on the air. Tragically, there was no further tea that was elaborated on here. Anyway, for a brief period from the mid to late 2000s to the early 2010s, Logo produced original programming that was a mix of scripted TV, reality TV, documentaries, sketch comedy, dating and romance shows, travel shows, music videos, cartoons, and even their own award shows. Production values ranged from decently high to literally homemade, and I'll be going more into some of my favorites later in the video. But before the era of streaming and capitalism taking the U out of YouTube, Logo was actually a pretty nifty space that provided a platform for a lot of queer creators who might have remained anonymous otherwise. In a way, the very launch of the channel was experimental, so much of their original programming was too. But a lot of these indie shows still featured pretty big queer celebrities like Margaret Cho, Alan Cumming, Kate McKinnon, Alec Mapa, Rosie O'Donnell, and countless others. Was I the only queer theater kid out there laughing my ass off at Jeffrey and Cole Casserole? Very possibly yes. So Logo also aired a lot of syndicated programs as well. Shows that actively centered around gay people like Queer as Folk or The L Word, which were otherwise only available on Showtime. Shows that featured gay characters or explored queer themes like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Sarah Silverman program. Shows that inspired gay awakenings like Xena Warrior Princess. Or simply a lot of older sitcoms that appeal to us gay millennials for some reason, like Golden Girls, Absolutely Fabulous, or I Dream of Jeannie. Sometimes they'd air episodes of South Park or Daria just for funsies, or any other show that was generally popular with queer people. Or entire movies like My Own Private Idaho and But I'm a Cheerleader, the latter of which is a masterpiece that I only ever saw air on Logo. For the first 5 years of its existence, Logo's viewership jumped from 10 million to 46 million by 2010. Brian Graydon was named the 15th most powerful gay person in America in 2007, which sounds like both a read and a threat, but good for him. And then they were dick-slapped with even more success after airing a little show you might have heard of called RuPaul's Drag Race. I also have a video about the pros and cons of the capitalist hellscape that is RuPaul's Drag Race. I can't believe I've already referenced 3 of my older videos. That's how you know I've been doing this for a long time and I need new material. This, of course, would go on to be Logo's highest rated and most viewed show both domestically and worldwide, garnering dozens of awards and dozens of spin-offs, both internationally and right here at home at World of Wonder Studios in Hollywood, which, believe it or not, is actually directly across the street from the goth club I used to go to all the time, where I could order a glass of absinthe and no one would bat an eye. Get it? Bat? I'm so tired. Anyway, with the explosion of Drag Race, as well as their decision to syndicate the king of the BuzzFeed gaze's hugely successful Nip Tuck, Logo seemed here to stay, honey. They even started branding themselves as Fierce TV, and had their own award show that my superficial gay ass dreamed of attending someday. Drag Race proved to be so successful, in fact, that we gradually saw less and less of the fun, quirky, experimental shows shows that gave the channel its charm in the first place. Sure, gay men were finally starring in their own shows after being previously typecast as sassy, witty sidekicks to their straight female counterparts, which in many ways is a positive. But eventually, the channel became all gay men all the time. Lesbian content was slowly shooed away from Logo's programming because lesbians weren't good enough for ratings, despite being a truly superior league of beings. Strictly bisexual content hardly existed in the first place, but we're pretty used to that, to be honest. And at this point, trans-centered content was practically non-existent. After all, this was back when RuPaul compared trans women competing on Drag Race to athletes taking steroids. The queens who did come out on Drag Race either did so after their season aired or right before they were eliminated. And then came the A-List New York in 2011. In a nutshell, the A-List New York was billed as a Real Housewives type show that starred a bunch of gay, mostly white men living in New York City. And the show was just them being stupid. Stupid, misogynistic, transphobic, racist, superficial, capitalistic posers. And they usually had awesome opinions on things, like calling their black female castmate ghetto and ratchet, or saying that dating effeminate men is like eating soy meat instead of real meat. And this abomination ran for not 1, but 2 seasons. And this still wasn't enough, because they later launched a single season of the A-List Dallas. These gays weren't unlikable enough, apparently, so they had to go and make them Republicans, too. Oh my god, I'm doing it again. I also have a video where I break down the first 3 episodes of this show and why it sucks. Also, I'm like halfway through filming, and I can hear and feel my voice just sounding awful, but I have to film this today because I won't have time to any other time this week. Just take comfort in the fact that your boy had a great time at a goth lesbian pride night in Silver Lake last night, and I actually got recognized, which is a trip, but also not that surprising considering what the event was and where it was, but that had never happened to me before. So, happy Pride Month. People know what I look like, apparently. So after a while, Logo just became the Drag Race channel. But hey, it couldn't be all that bad, right? In 2013, Logo's viewership peaked at 53.2 million households. They were riding high for what honestly felt like a few minutes. Like the amount of time an avocado has right after it becomes ripe and right before it turns entirely rotten for no reason. Because after a Logo programming slate dropped that featured no queer characters in any starring roles, it prompted Queerty to ask if Logo was committing the unthinkable, going straight. And unfortunately, this theory had a solid amount of truth in it. See, in 2012, Logo announced its plans to shift its programming strategy by making more content to appeal to mainstream audiences, and not just the queer community. Their initial reasoning was citing a study that said that 53% of gay people lived openly but preferred not to showcase their sexual orientation, while only 30% surveyed said they preferred living and socializing within exclusively queer communities. And they needed some sort of numbers to justify the fact that they didn't quite get their foot in the door of this niche market the way that they wanted to. The same Logo executive that spoke with The Wrap continued by saying, Logo had a cap of roughly 40 million subscribers, and the sheer number of gays and lesbians even available to capture as subscribers was never going to be enough to sustain the channel. Understandable, but the BTQIA plus erasure here is palpable. Welcome back to 2012, my good bitches. With these limitations, Viacom was virtually unable to provide any more funds for original programming outside of Drag Race that actively centered around queer people, because there was a cap on LG viewers, right? Because fuck the rest of us, right? So kicking off this trend with the A-list, Logo began producing what were basically the asylum versions of actually successful reality shows, joining the leagues of Bravo and Oxygen and Lifetime by making even more content to try to appeal to the id of the straight white woman, because God forbid a channel showcase special interests and not join the bandwagon of making everything bland so as to appease a wider audience, which hardly ever works, because when you try to make a product for everyone, you make a product for no one, Disney. So let's take a look at some of the absolutely killer shows that came with their rebrand. Eden Woods World, about a former Toddlers and Tiaras contestant that was not Honey Boo Boo. Also, by the way, Toddlers and Tiaras is just the musical Gypsy for straight people, right? Scandalicious, a show that literally does not appear at all when you search for it. Design My Dog, which is basically Project Runway, but for dogs, and we wonder why other countries want to bomb Wise Guys, which is Mob Wives and Real Housewives combined, but they threw in a gay guy, cause why not? And Outrageous, which is kind of like what I do, but somehow way stupider. And surprise, surprise! It didn't work. Turns out the women who did watch Logo weren't actually Bravo or Oxygen refugees. They were mostly lesbians and or gay men's hags who did not want to see them making assholes of themselves on television. And TV critic Victor Kearney explained this god-awful decision better than I ever could. I can't understand why the execs would take this route. If they wanted to reach a broader audience, they could start with a few scripted shows that showcase different aspects of our community. Reality shows that go beyond gossip and sex and a serious news show. It feels like Logo is selling us out. Everything they stood for is being replaced to fit a more mainstream format. Yes, we want more diverse views of our community, but instead of giving us any positive images of LGBT people, we get Design My Dog. And their decision to distance themselves from LGBTQ content seemed to be when it was only most convenient. Hence this tweet from RuPaul in 2014. Trust, Logo TV hasn't distanced itself from me. Not while I'm still paying the light bill over there. So while the experimental aspect of Logo turned into just throwing whatever bland slop they could at the wall to see what sticks, there were two other hemispheres keeping Logo on life support: old sitcom reruns and Drag Race. Even RuPaul's Drag U became less about drag queens helping women regain their confidence and more about just giving the girlies some makeup tips. I don't know about you guys, but if there's one thing I want to see other queens do, it's tell butch lesbians in cool leather jackets how much better they'd look with a nice red lip. And despite Drag Race being their golden cash cow, that somehow didn't inspire anyone to produce spin-offs about things that people loved about the show. You know, like the drag part. Don't give the queens with millions of followers worldwide their own shows or anything. Only RuPaul gets to have that. RuPaul is the only drag queen who's allowed to have their own show. Ever. Even on the so-called gay channel. Oh, but wait, they aren't the gay channel anymore. Like a closeted Mormon man attending conversion therapy, it became clear that after Logo decided to go straight, they thrust themselves into an identity crisis that only worsened their circumstances. So Logo did find a brief period of relief in 2016 when they returned to their roots a little bit, after launching Drag Race All-Stars and a gay version of The Bachelor called Finding Prince Charming. All-Stars obviously proved to be a success, and Finding Prince Charming's high ratings had initially earned it a second season. It's not entirely clear why the second season was canceled, but some have speculated that it had something to do with the first season lead having worked as a male escort in the past. Oh, the humanity. The producers who 86'd season 2 are probably just jealous that they never thought to charge. Nonetheless, with a still limited audience, the creeping rise of streaming platforms and social media, and the fact that Logo was only available in certain cable packages, the fate of the channel was looking grim. Then came the final nail in the bedazzled coffin. In 2017, Viacom decided to move Drag Race to VH1. VH1. Given that the channel was more or less dead at this point, All Stars was moved to VH1 the following year. And so Logo became not even a shell of what it once was, because it then just became solely a flank to TV land, with occasional reruns of Drag Race to preserve any sense of individuality that might remain on a channel that was once defined by the very idea of individuality. In 2019, Viacom and CBS merged to make Viacom CBS,
How original.
which later turned into Paramount Global in 2022. While there are a few OG Logo shows available on Paramount Plus like All Stars, the Logo brand didn't make the cut when Paramount began migrating its content to its, mid-streaming platform. It has a very small presence on Paramount's Pluto TV, but the Logo mobile app is gone entirely, and it's no longer mentioned under Paramount's list of global brands. And its YouTube channel is still sort of active-ish. Oof. Oh boy. They do worse numbers than I do. So when Logo's shift in programming was first announced in 2012, Huffington Post published an article where this twink makes some very good points, and also some that are worth refuting, in my opinion. Do keep in mind that this article was published over a decade ago, so obviously the media and political landscape has changed since then, but this is specifically referring to queer representation before I was old enough to vote. At this juncture in America, reality show leads are best left to the tried and tested bitchy straight woman, and Logo is doing the gay community a favor by taking us out of the spotlight. Sure, most people are smart enough to make the distinction that all gays aren't like those gays on Logo, just as Italians aren't all table flippers like those ladies on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. But when it comes down to it, we live in a country where the vast majority of Americans can't marry legally, and there's a real threat of an anti-gay candidate becoming president.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
And as unfortunate as it may be, stereotypes on TV greatly influence straight America's perception of who we are. That's a reality we don't want to point and laugh at. Now, for the most part, Mr. Ben Harvey is very correct in this statement. This isn't the type of representation we want, obviously, which is why he believed that the death of Logo was, quote, a blessing in disguise for the gay rights movement. But here's where I've got beef with Harvey's take, and this applies to queer politics both then and now. The concern over not being like one of those gays is simply internalized homophobia, and it's something we've been seeing become more and more prevalent in recent years. It's rooted in the idea that if you act more normal, you'll somehow be more accepted by a greater society, when in reality, all homophobes view you as subhuman and undeserving of equal rights, no matter how flamboyantly you act or not. This is why we have pride in the first place. This article was published after the A-List New York premiered, and before the slew of reality slop that came after it. Harvey taking issue with stereotypical representation is absolutely valid, especially with a shit show like the A-List. But he simply bids the channel good riddance rather than proposing an alternative for what was the only LGBTQ TV channel at the time. Given the examples cited in this article, tell me you've never watched any Logo shows besides A-List New York without telling me you've never watched any other Logo shows besides A-List New York. So let's take a look at some original programming on Logo that isn't Drag Race that's also very much worth mentioning. We've got my personal favorite, Jeffrey and Cole Casserole, a sketch comedy show filmed entirely on a webcam, starring two YouTubers who are approached via Facebook by Logo executives.
I am not coming out of this bathroom.
But it's Christmas!
Oh, but Francis, this looks like the dumbest shit ever. You're goddamn right it's the dumbest shit ever. And Cole went on to win a Tony this year, which they accepted in drag. Everybody congratulate this diva right now. This show was actually one of the first seeds planted in my head that I might start a YouTube channel someday, and just look at me now. Hey good bitches, this is Editing Francis. So I made a slight mistake with the dates regarding Gay Skit Happens. My dyslexic ass read the premiere date as 2006 rather than the actual date, which was 2016. I do believe this show briefly aired on TV during Logo's relief period, but I had only ever seen the show on Logo's YouTube channel since I didn't have cable in 2016. I should have assumed it was newer just based on the quality alone. I don't know why I didn't put two and two together on that, so apologies for that error on my end. Anywho, just wanted to clear that up before we continue. They also had Gay Skit Happens, which we're still blessed with in HD right here on this very website.
I've told the whole world that you hate
Figs! I hate figs. You're so right. What are they? Are they raisins? Are they dates? I made them and I don't even know. God, look what's over here. Remember her? Ooh, what was I drinking that day?
Then there was the Big Gay Sketch Show, which was, my gay Gen X friends are gonna be so mad at me for this. It was fine. It was fine. It was a nice show created by Rosie O'Donnell as like a gay SNL. I'm happy it existed, okay? And of course, there was the stop motion masterpiece, Rick and Steve, the happiest gay couple in all the world, which aged, sorta badly? Why did it age badly, Francis? Short answer, it was 2007. Like a lot of older episodes of South Park and Family Guy, most of it is just good old-fashioned, politically incorrect fun, and some jokes age badly. That's just the natural progression of comedy, something that comedians seem to have a very hard time wrapping their head around these days. Regardless, the fact that this show was allowed on television in 2007 is kind of a big deal. One of their more popular shows, which also got its own spin-off movie, was Noah's Ark, the very first scripted TV show to center around queer black men. They also had panels and docuseries of people candidly sharing their queer experiences, like Real Gay, That Sex Show, and Coming Out Stories. There was lesbian representation with original shows like X's and O's, Curl Girls, and Gimme Sugar, the latter of which faced some criticism for biphobic comments made towards one of the cast members, but were decidedly left in by the producers to intentionally bring awareness to the rampant biphobia in the queer community. And most importantly, in my opinion, was its trans-centered content. Transgeneration was a docuseries that followed 4 college students from 2004 to 2005, 2 trans men and 2 trans women. Unsurprisingly, Transgeneration was ignored by most major outlets, but it still won a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Documentary. It was praised for being not just one of the first stories to discuss transgender youths, but the first one to do so positively, and not in the usual depressing Hollywood context. It also faced some criticism for only featuring trans people that conformed to a strict gender binary, implying that it was produced to appeal to cisgender audiences. And the non-binary erasure here was undeniable. But you have to remember that this was released during a decade where the mere idea of unsensationalized documentary content focusing on trans issues was practically inconceivable. I didn't even know what non-binary was until I got to college. Then when I did, everything in my life suddenly made sense, and I was like, There was also Trans-American Love Story, a reality dating show hosted by Alec Mapa, where men vie for the love of trans activist Calpurnia Adams. It won a GLAAD Award for Outstanding Reality Program, and was praised by LGBTQ publication Washington Blade, which called the show, quote, refreshing for its lack of sensationalism. Another reviewer for Salon wrote, the show's producers, thankfully, resist the urge to throw in big, manipulative Fox-style surprises. While some of the men get freaked out by each other, Calpurnia is likable and accepting and takes the whole crazy assortment of characters in stride. So with its tiny little nugget of space on Pluto TV and people like me fondly reminiscing about their older programming, Logo TV is currently trapped in a terrifying liminal space between states of being. I could complain till I'm blue in the face about how Logo sold out, but at the same time, as someone whose income is also dependent on views, I can't really blame them for wanting to shift in a different direction, because numbers never lie, unless you're Donald Jessica Trump. And even though I do sometimes miss the days of special interest channels because, like I said, I'm too old to be drafted into World War III, with the current media landscape, it's not at all surprising that Logo went by the wayside. With access to LGBTQ content at all times and ways to directly communicate with the people you see, a cable TV channel catering to niche and, I hate to say it, controversial interests is all but obsolete at this point. But all good things must come to an end, and I'm happy that I'm simultaneously old and young enough to have had this weird, super more 2000s queer content at a time where I had just come out, was still figuring out my identity, and was so excited to grow up and find other people like me. I'm very happy for younger queer people in that they have so much more access to this kind of content, but knowing about the only gay channel on TV kind of felt like being in a secret club, and if there's one thing teenagers and gay people love, it's secret clubs. I remember being 14, 15 and so badly wanting to be friends with, well, other funny gay people that I saw on Logo TV. And now I am, and I know that 14-year-old me would be absolutely blown away at the fact that this is what I do for a living. And what I do for a living makes me appreciate early Logo even more, because I know how important it is to provide queer and trans content creators with a platform to do weird, stupid shit. Because I am now a queer content creator doing weird, stupid shit. Oh my god, wait. Is this my fault? Am I and others like me responsible for the demise of Logo TV? Who killed Logo TV? That actually sounds like the name of a show they'd air. Anyway, I think I've yapped enough. Let's check out the winning comments from the last video. Certified Sweetheart says, male gaze sounds like male gaze for a reason. Sniper Creed 126 says, Title 9 month rolls off the tongue as well as Tesla's rolling off the production line. Klissberg 6841 says, fellas, is it gayer to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is queerer in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of fabulous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of manhoods, and by opposing, finish them. You too could be featured in the next video. Leave a comment below. I will pick my favorite ones and give you a shout out next time, but if you would like to guarantee your name be featured at the end of every video, please consider joining my Patreon. If you join any of the membership tiers that are conveniently named after Fallout protagonists, your name will be featured at the end of every video. You might also get other cool stuff like access to my Discord, behind the scenes content on how I make my wigs, ad-free and uncensored versions of my videos. So if you love my content and my drag, you can support this channel directly by clicking the link to my Patreon in the description box. If you would like to see me simp for my favorite game characters and get visibly frustrated in real time, please follow me on Twitch. And if you'd like to see even more of my clown mug elsewhere, consider following me on Instagram or Threads or Blue Sky. My handle for all of the above is @QueenCokeFrancis. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't done so already, please pitch a TV channel of your choice to a bunch of boring executives, and when they ask exactly what kind of content you plan on airing, give them a pitch to remember by going ahead and unzipping your pants and dick slapping those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. Thank you so much to all my patrons and subscribers who keep this channel going, and of course, as always, until next time,